Jake Morrison walked into the giant hall where aliens from across the galaxy made important decisions. The walls were made of some shiny metal that reflected light in strange ways. Creatures with 4 arms, beings that looked like walking crystals, and things he could not even describe sat in floating chairs around a massive table. They all looked at him like he was a small child who had wandered into an adult meeting. The leader of this group was a tall blue creature called High Counselor, Zephyra. She had 3 eyes and spoke in a voice that sounded like music, but Jake knew she was not being friendly. She was telling him and all of humanity exactly what they could and could not do in this big galaxy. "Your people may keep 3 star systems," Zephyra said while looking at her notes. "You may build small ships for trade and basic defense. You may not develop weapons that could threaten other species. We will check on you every few years to make sure you follow these rules." Jake nodded and smiled politely. He said all the right words about how grateful humanity was for this generous offer. Inside his head, he was thinking about the message he had received just before this meeting. The message was only 3 words, but they changed everything. The words were, "Project Saturn approved." While Jake sat in this meeting pretending to be a humble representative of a weak species, something incredible was happening on a planet called Kepler 442b. This planet was supposed to be a simple farming world where humans grew food crops. The official report said it had good soil and nice weather for growing grain. What the reports did not mention was that humans had been digging. Captain Lisa Reynolds stood on the surface of Kepler 442b and watched the sunset. To anyone watching from space, she looked like a farmer checking her crops. The fields around her were full of healthy grain plants that would feed millions of people. But Lisa was not really looking at the crops. She was looking at the small metal device in her hand that was receiving signals from deep underground. Miles beneath her feet, Commander Ryan Phillips was directing the biggest construction project in human history. Thousands of workers in environmental suits were using massive machines to hollow out the planet. They were not mining for metals or digging for water. They were creating space for something that would change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The underground chambers were already larger than most cities. Giant machines carved through rock, while other devices reinforced the walls with material stronger than anything the aliens above had ever seen. Every piece of equipment had been brought to this planet in secret, hidden inside shipments that were supposed to contain farming tools and supplies. Director Helen Carter managed all of this from her office on Earth. Her official job was coordinating agricultural shipments to human colonies. Her real job was making sure that every supply ship heading to Kepler 442b carried exactly what the underground project needed. When alien inspectors checked the cargo manifests, they saw lists of tractors, fertilizer, and farming equipment. They did not know that the tractors were actually gravitational field generators, and the fertilizer contained rare metals from distant asteroid belts. The workers on Kepler 442b were not really farmers either. They were engineers, physicists, and military specialists who had volunteered for a mission that would take decades to complete. During the day, they maintained the surface farms and acted like simple colonists. At night, they disappeared into hidden elevators that took them deep underground where the real work happened. Dr. Amanda Price ran the research division from a laboratory built inside what used to be the planet's core. Her team was studying alien technology that human agents had secretly acquired over the years. They were learning how alien ships worked, how alien weapons functioned, and most importantly, how to build better versions of everything. Every breakthrough was immediately sent to the construction teams. New materials made their ships stronger. New engines made them faster. New weapons made them more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. But all of this happened in complete secret while the galaxy thought humans were just growing food and learning to live peacefully among other species. The alien inspectors came every 6 months. They would land their ships in the designated areas and take tours of the farming facilities. The humans showed them fields of grain, processing plants where the grain was turned into food, and storage facilities where the food was kept before shipping. The inspectors wrote reports about how well the human colony was doing, and how grateful the humans seemed for the chance to contribute to galactic civilization. What the inspectors never saw were the massive elevators hidden beneath the grain storage buildings. They never noticed that some of the farm workers had hands that were too soft for manual labor, or that their eyes held the kind of intelligence that came from years of advanced scientific training. They never wondered why a simple farming colony needed such powerful communication equipment, or why the power generators were 10 times larger than necessary for agricultural work. Colonel Eric Turner coordinated with similar projects on 6 other human worlds. Each planet had a different cover story. One was supposed to be a mining operation. Another was a research station studying alien plant life. A third was a simple colonial settlement where humans were learning to live on a world with different gravity. But on every one of these worlds, the same thing was happening. Humans were digging deep and building something that would shock the galaxy. The work was dangerous and difficult. Several workers had died in construction accidents. Others had suffered injuries that would affect them for the rest of their lives. But none of them complained or asked to leave. They all understood that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They were preparing for the day when humanity would no longer have to bow down to alien masters who thought humans were too primitive to matter. Jake Morrison finished his meeting with the Galactic Council and returned to his ship. As he traveled back toward human space, he sent a coded message to every human world. The message was simple. Phase 1 continues as planned. The galaxy thought it had put humanity in its place. The galaxy thought humans had accepted their role as junior partners in galactic civilization. The galaxy was wrong. While the aliens argued about politics and trade agreements, humanity was preparing for war. 15 years had passed since the first humans began digging beneath Kepler 442b. Admiral Peter Hayes now commanded what everyone called the Kepler Agricultural Development Authority, but the name was just another lie in a web of deception that had grown to cover half the galaxy. The farming colony above still produced grain and vegetables, but the real crop growing beneath the surface was something far more dangerous. The underground shipyard now stretched across hundreds of miles. Where once there had been solid rock, now there were construction bays large enough to hold entire cities. Massive robotic arms moved pieces of hull plating that weighed more than battleships. Welding operations created light so bright that workers had to use special protective equipment just to be in the same chamber. The air itself hummed with the energy of thousands of machines working day and night to build something that had never existed before. Dr. Amanda Price walked through her research laboratories and felt proud of what her team had accomplished. They had taken alien technology and made it better in ways that should have been impossible. The gravitational manipulation systems they had developed could move objects the size of moons. The energy shields they had created could stop weapons that could destroy planets. The faster-than-light communication networks they had built could send messages across the galaxy in seconds instead of weeks. But the most impressive achievement was the ship itself. Captain Kevin Blake stood on what would become the bridge of this massive vessel and tried to understand how big it really was. The ship was 50 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide. It had its own gravitational field strong enough to hold an atmosphere. It could carry a crew of 10,000 people and still have room for entire fleets of smaller ships. When it was finished, it would be the largest mobile object in galactic history. The ship's hull was made from materials that could absorb energy weapons and redirect the power back at enemies. The armor was so thick that it could survive direct hits from weapons designed to crack open planets. Inside the ship were manufacturing facilities that could build replacement parts, weapons factories that could produce ammunition, and even farms that could grow food for the crew. This ship was not just a weapon, it was a mobile civilization that could survive anywhere in the galaxy. Agent Tracy Nelson maintained the illusion on the surface with the skill of a master performer. When alien inspection teams arrived for their routine visits, they saw exactly what they expected to see. Human farmers worked in the fields during the day and went to their simple homes at night. The grain processing facilities operated exactly as the reports claimed they should. The power usage matched what a farming colony would need. Even the number of supply ships coming and going was perfectly normal for an agricultural world. What the inspectors did not know was that every farmer on the surface was also an engineer or a scientist or a military officer. The grain processing facilities had hidden elevators that led to the underground shipyards. The power grid that appeared to serve only farming equipment was actually feeding the most advanced construction project in human history. The supply ships that brought farming equipment were also delivering components for weapons systems that could level mountain ranges. Colonel Eric Turner received regular reports from the other secret projects scattered across human space. On Kepler 283c, the humans had built what appeared to be a mining operation. Alien observers saw massive excavation equipment pulling ore from the ground and loading it onto cargo ships. They did not see that the excavation was creating space for another shipyard, or that the ore was being used to build hull plating for another planet-sized warship. On Gliese 667cc, humans had established what looked like a research station studying alien plant life. Visiting scientists from other species were impressed by the human dedication to learning about xenobiology. They did not realize that the research facilities were hiding the construction of a ship designed specifically for long-range reconnaissance and deep space warfare. Each of the 6 hidden shipyards was building a different type of vessel. Some were designed for direct combat with the heaviest weapons and strongest armor. Others were built for speed and stealth, capable of striking enemy positions and disappearing before anyone could respond. One ship was being built as a command vessel that could coordinate entire fleets across multiple star systems simultaneously. Dr. Laura Watson ran the computer systems that controlled all of this construction. The artificial intelligence networks she had designed could manage millions of different tasks at the same time. They could calculate the stress on hull plates while directing the movement of construction equipment, while monitoring the life support systems while tracking the location of every worker in the facility. These computer systems were more advanced than anything any other species had ever created. Commander Frank Miller coordinated the training programs for the crews that would eventually operate these ships. Thousands of humans were learning to use weapon systems that did not officially exist. They were practicing maneuvers in simulators that recreated space battles on a scale that had never been attempted. They were studying alien military tactics and developing strategies that would take advantage of the unique capabilities their ships would possess. The training was intense and dangerous. Pilots learned to fly ships that could accelerate fast, enough to crush a human body. Weapons officers practiced with systems that could accidentally destroy their own ship if used incorrectly. Engineers studied technology so advanced that understanding it required years of specialized education. But every person in the program understood that they were preparing for something that would determine the future of the human species. Security was absolute. Every person involved in the project had been carefully selected and thoroughly investigated. Communication with the outside world was strictly controlled. Even family members of the workers believed the cover stories about farming colonies and research stations. The secret was kept by 30,000 people across 6 worlds, and not one of them had ever revealed the truth. The galaxy continued to see humans as a minor species that posed no threat to the established order. Human diplomats attended council meetings and accepted limitations on their expansion. Human traders conducted business according to alien regulations. Human scientists published research that was always just slightly behind what other species had already discovered. Every action was calculated to maintain the illusion that humanity was exactly what it appeared to be. But beneath the surface of 6 different worlds, something was growing that would change everything. The first ship was almost ready for its initial test flights. Soon the galaxy would learn what humans had really been doing while everyone else was sleeping. General Patricia Stone received the message she had been waiting for during her morning briefing on Earth. The communication was short and direct. Drakmori War Fleet has entered human space. Fleet composition, 300 vessels including flagship Corvanus. Estimated time to first human colony, 72 hours. She read the message twice, then activated the secure communication system that would change galactic history forever. The Drakmori hegemony had finally decided that humanity's 3 star systems contained too many valuable resources to leave in the hands of what they considered a primitive species. Their war fleet was the most powerful military force that had ever been assembled for the conquest of human space. 300 ships, including massive dreadnoughts and fast attack cruisers, were moving through space toward what they expected to be an easy victory against humans who were limited to small defensive vessels and basic weapons. Admiral Stephen Koch stood in his command center, buried deep beneath the surface of Kepler 442b, and watched as status reports came in from all 6 hidden shipyards. For 20 years, these facilities had been building in secret while the galaxy slept. Now it was time to wake up and show the universe what humanity had really been doing during those quiet decades of apparent submission to alien authority. All stations report ready, Koch announced to his staff. Begin awakening protocol on my mark. He paused for a moment, thinking about all the people who had worked and died to reach this moment. Then he gave the order that would reveal humanity's true capabilities to a galaxy that had consistently underestimated them. Execute awakening protocol. All ships, emerge and take positions. On the surface of Kepler 442b, the grain fields that had provided cover for 20 years suddenly began to shift and move. What had appeared to be natural landscape was revealed to be carefully constructed panels that could be moved aside when the time came. Massive sections of what looked like continental plains folded back like the petals of some enormous flower. Beneath them, something incredible began to rise. Captain Barry Green commanded the first vessel to fully emerge from its hidden construction bay. The HMS Earthshaker was 50 kilometers of advanced military technology that had been built in absolute secrecy beneath a farming colony that no one had bothered to investigate too closely. As the ship rose from beneath the planet's surface, its emergence caused earthquakes that registered on sensors throughout the star system. The ship was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Its hull was dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon arrays lined its sides like the scales of some massive predator. The bridge tower rose from the center of the ship like a mountain peak, containing command and control systems more advanced than anything the Sci galaxy had ever seen. This was not just a warship. This was a mobile fortress capable of challenging entire civilizations. Dr. Laura Watson monitored the technical systems as the other hidden fleets began their emergence sequences. On Kepler 283c, the HMS Stormbreaker broke free from beneath what everyone had thought was a mining operation. The ship specialized in long-range weapon systems and could destroy enemy vessels from distances measured in light minutes. On Gliese 1667cc, the HMS Void Hammer emerged from the research station that had been studying alien plant life. This ship was designed for close combat and could tear apart enemy fleets with gravitational weapons that folded space itself. Each emergence was perfectly coordinated. The ships had been built in modular sections that could be assembled quickly once they reached the surface. Automated systems that had been tested thousands of times in simulation now performed flawlessly in reality. Within 6 hours, all 6 planet ships had fully emerged from their hiding places and were taking their positions in space. Commander Frank Miller coordinated the fleet movements from his position aboard the HMS Earthshaker. The Drakmori War Fleet was still approaching human space, confident that they would face only the small defensive ships that human technology was supposed to be capable of building. Their intelligence reports had not prepared them for ships the size of small moons or weapon systems that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. The human fleet moved into formation with the precision of a military unit that had been training for this moment for 2 decades. Each ship took its assigned position in a pattern that would allow them to use their weapon systems most effectively, while providing mutual support if the battle went longer than expected. But most of the human commanders doubted that this battle would last very long. Captain Rachel Morgan commanded the HMS Stormbreaker as it moved into position between 2 of the other planet ships. Her vessel was equipped with the most advanced sensor systems humanity had ever built, and she could track every ship in the approaching Drakmori fleet from a distance that would have been impossible for conventional technology. She knew exactly how many enemies they were facing, and exactly what those enemies were capable of doing. The Drakmori had brought 300 ships because their military analysts had calculated that this would be more than enough to overwhelm any defensive force that humanity could assemble. They had studied human technology and concluded that even the most optimistic estimates of human military capability would not require more than 50 ships to defeat. They had brought 6 times that number to ensure absolute victory. and to demonstrate Drakmori power to any other species that might be watching. Major Tony Lewis coordinated the fighter wing operations as tens of thousands of smaller human ships poured out of the internal bays of the planet ships. These fighters were not the primitive craft that alien intelligence services expected humans to possess. They were advanced vessels that incorporated technology decades ahead of anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. Each fighter was capable of operating independently in deep space for months at a time and carried weapons that could destroy ships much larger than themselves. The Drakmori war fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space and began their final approach toward what they expected to be an easy conquest. Their sensors immediately detected the human fleet waiting for them, but the readings were so far outside their expectations that many Drakmori commanders assumed their equipment was malfunctioning. War Admiral Thrax commanded the Drakmori flagship and had personally planned this invasion. He had studied human military capabilities for years and was confident that his fleet could defeat anything humanity might send against them. When his sensors showed him 6 ships each larger than his entire fleet combined, his first reaction was disbelief. His second reaction was fear. The two fleets faced each other across the darkness of space, separated by a few million kilometers, and by the complete transformation of galactic military power that was about to take place. The galaxy had slept, while humanity prepared. Now humanity was ready to show everyone what they had been building in the dark. Admiral Charles Watson stood on the bridge of the HMS Earthshaker and watched the Drakmori war fleet arrange itself for battle. 300 ships spread across space in formations that had been used successfully for centuries against dozens of different species. War Admiral Thrax was following standard Drakmori military doctrine, which called for overwhelming firepower delivered by massed formations of heavy cruisers supported by fast attack vessels. The alien commander clearly expected this battle to follow familiar patterns. His fleet would advance in waves, use their superior numbers to overwhelm human defenses, and then move in for the final assault on human colonies. Thrax had fought similar battles against 12 different species over his long military career. He had never lost a single engagement. He was confident that today would be no different. Primitive humans, came the translated voice of War Admiral Thrax across the communication channels. You face the full might of the Drakmori hegemony. Surrender your worlds now, and you will be permitted to serve us as a client species. Resist, and your civilization will be destroyed completely. Watson looked at the tactical displays showing the positions of both fleets. The Drakmori had brought impressive firepower by the standards of conventional galactic warfare. Their flagship alone carried enough weapons to level continents. Their supporting vessels could destroy entire orbital installations with concentrated tear. Against any normal human fleet, they would have achieved victory within hours. Captain Rachel Morgan commanded the HMS Stormbreaker from her position in the human formation. Her ship had been designed specifically for long-range combat operations, and its primary weapon systems were already locked onto the Drakmori flagship. She waited for Admiral Watson's orders while her weapons officers completed their targeting calculations. You want to see what primitive humans can do? Watson said into the communication system. Captain Morgan, show them. The HMS Stormbreaker's primary gravitational lance fired a focused beam of energy that folded space itself around the target. The Drakmori flagship Corvinus, which had been the pride of the hegemony fleet and had never been seriously damaged in over a century of service, simply ceased to exist. The gravitational weapon compressed the massive ship into a singularity that lasted for exactly 3 seconds before dissipating. 12 escort vessels that had been too close to the flagship were pulled into the gravitational collapse and destroyed, along with their command ship. The destruction of their flagship created chaos in the Drakmori formation. Ship commanders who had been following Thrax's battle plan suddenly found themselves without orders or coordination. Some vessels tried to retreat to a safer distance. Others advanced individually toward the human fleet. A few simply stopped, moving entirely while their crews tried to understand what had just happened. Major Tony Lewis coordinated the fighter operations as tens of thousands of human craft poured out of the planet ship's internal bays. These small vessels moved with speed and precision that shocked the Drakmori pilots who tried to intercept them. Human fighters used gravitational drives that allowed them to change direction in ways that should have been impossible. Their weapons could punch through armor that was designed to stop much larger projectiles. The battle quickly became a demonstration of the difference between conventional galactic military technology and the advanced systems humanity had developed in secret. Drakmori ships that had been built to fight other galactic species found themselves completely outmatched by human vessels that used principles of physics that most alien scientists considered theoretical curiosities. Colonel Janet Young commanded the boarding operations from the HMS Voidhammer. When her ship's gravitational tethers locked onto Drakmori cruisers, the alien vessels found themselves being pulled into docking bays large enough to swallow entire ships. Human Marines who boarded the captured vessels wore armor that made them nearly invulnerable to Drakmori weapons. Their equipment could cut through any known defensive system, and their tactics had been developed specifically for fighting in the confined spaces of alien spacecraft. The Drakmori had expected to face human soldiers equipped with basic projectile weapons and simple body armor. Instead, they encountered Marines whose suits enhanced their strength and speed while providing complete protection from energy weapons. Human boarding parties moved through Drakmori ships like unstoppable forces, capturing key systems and taking prisoners with an efficiency that terrified the alien crews. Commander Gary Turner managed communications as word of the battle spread across the galaxy in real time. The engagement was being monitored by intelligence services from dozens of different species, all of whom had expected to watch the destruction of human military power. Instead, they were witnessing the emergence of a new dominant force in galactic affairs. News networks throughout the galaxy interrupted regular programming to broadcast footage of planet-sized human warships dismantling one of the most feared military forces in known space. Political leaders who had dismissed humanity as irrelevant suddenly found themselves calling emergency meetings to discuss the implications of human military superiority. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes. When it ended, the Drakmori warfleet had been completely destroyed or captured. 237 ships had been reduced to debris or taken as prizes by human forces. 63 vessels had been captured intact along with their crews. Not a single human ship had been damaged significantly enough to require major repairs. War Admiral Thrax himself was captured when human Marines boarded his backup command vessel. The alien officer who had planned to add human space to the Drakmori hegemony found himself a prisoner aboard one of the ships he had intended to destroy. He spent his first day in captivity, trying to understand how his overwhelming numerical advantage had become a complete disaster. The Galactic Council called an emergency session for the first time in 300 years. Representatives from 47 different species demanded immediate explanations for how humanity had hidden such massive military capabilities from galactic intelligence services. Some species began making diplomatic overtures to human representatives, hoping to establish friendly relations before humanity decided to expand its territory. Admiral Watson toured the captured Drakmori vessels and found their technology to be exactly what human intelligence had predicted. The aliens had built powerful ships using conventional approaches to spacecraft design and weapon systems. Their vessels were impressive by galactic standards, but completely inadequate when faced with human innovations in gravitational manipulation, energy distribution, and defensive systems. Captain Kevin Blake reviewed the battle recordings and noted that human tactical doctrine had performed exactly as predicted. The planet ships had demonstrated their ability to engage multiple enemy formations simultaneously while maintaining perfect coordination. The fighter wings had shown that human small craft could operate effectively in large-scale fleet actions. The boarding operations had proven that human ground forces could capture enemy vessels intact when tactical situations required it. The galaxy had learned several important lessons in 6 hours. First, humanity was no longer the primitive species that could be safely ignored or easily conquered. Second, human military technology was generations ahead of anything other species possessed. Third, the balance of power in galactic civilization had shifted completely in favor of a species that most governments had considered irrelevant just 1 day earlier. But the most important lesson was still being absorbed by political leaders across the galaxy. Humanity had spent 20 years building this capability in complete secrecy, while maintaining the appearance of harmless agricultural colonies and research stations. If humans could hide planet-sized warships, what else might they be capable of doing without anyone noticing? The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened with representatives from 47 species, all demanding explanations for how humanity had hidden such massive military capabilities from the most advanced intelligence services in known space. The great chamber that had once intimidated human diplomats now felt different. The aliens who had previously looked down on humanity with condescending tolerance now watched human representatives with barely concealed fear and growing respect. Ambassador Jake Morrison returned to the council chamber, but this time he was not alone. Admiral Peter Hayes and General Patricia Stone flanked him as he walked to the speaking platform. The human delegation no longer needed to bow or ask permission to address the assembly. The dynamic of galactic politics had fundamentally changed in the span of 6 hours. High Counselor Zephyra, whose blue skin had taken on a pale shade that indicated stress among her species, addressed the human delegation with a voice that no longer carried its previous tone of superior authority. Ambassador Morrison, the Council demands to know how your species concealed the construction of planet-sized warships from our monitoring systems. Such deception violates every treaty governing peaceful development among galactic civilizations. Admiral Hayes stepped forward and smiled with the confidence of someone who no longer needed to pretend weakness. Counselor Zephyra, we concealed nothing. We simply built our ships in locations where your people chose not to look carefully. Your inspector saw farming colonies and research stations because that is what they expected to see. They never bothered to investigate deeply enough to discover what we were really doing. The representatives of the Vorthak Empire, who had previously served as humanity's protectors in galactic affairs, demanded to know how long the construction project had taken. General Stone provided the answer that left the entire assembly in stunned silence. We began planning immediately after our first meeting with this council 25 years ago. Active construction started 20 years ago. We have been building continuously ever since. Dr. Amanda Price presented technical specifications that left the council's most advanced scientists speechless. The gravitational manipulation systems that powered human weapons were based on principles that most galactic civilizations considered purely theoretical. The metamaterial armor that protected human ships used manufacturing techniques that required precision beyond what any other species had achieved. The quantum communication networks that coordinated human fleets could transmit information instantly across distances that would take conventional signals years to cross. How is this possible? Asked the representative of the Zentari Confederation, whose species was considered the most technologically advanced in the galaxy. Our scientists estimate that developing such capabilities should require centuries of research and development. Dr. Price's response revealed the scope of human intellectual achievement. We began by studying captured samples of your technology. Then we improved upon your designs using approaches that your scientific methods had not considered. Human creativity and innovation allowed us to make breakthrough discoveries that shortened development timelines by decades. Captain Kevin Blake testified about the construction process that had created 6 planet ships without anyone noticing. Every human involved in this project volunteered for a mission they knew would require decades of secret work. 40,000 people kept this secret perfectly while maintaining cover identities as farmers, miners, and researchers. We did this because you underestimated our species and our capabilities. The political implications of human military superiority were already rippling throughout galactic civilization. The Drakmori hegemony, whose fleet had been destroyed in the first engagement with human forces, sent a formal delegation requesting immediate alliance negotiations. The Korath Empire began withdrawing their forces from contested border regions, rather than risk confrontation with human patrols. Species that had previously refused to establish diplomatic relations with humanity suddenly discovered urgent reasons to open embassies in human space. Trade delegations arrived daily with offers for exclusive commercial agreements. Scientific exchange programs that had been rejected for decades were suddenly approved and fast-tracked through galactic bureaucracy. Commander Frank Miller now coordinated joint operations as humanity's planet ships took their positions throughout the galaxy. Rather than operating as conquerors, the human fleet became a peacekeeping force that could end conflicts simply by arriving in contested systems. The sight of the HMS Earthshaker patrolling the disputed Vega sector caused 3 different territorial wars to end immediately, as all parties involved decided that negotiation was preferable to fighting near-human warships. The HMS Stormbreaker positioned itself in the trade corridor between the hegemony and the Empire, ensuring that commercial shipping could operate safely for the first time in decades. Piracy dropped to 0 in any system where human ships were present. Criminal organizations that had operated freely under the protection of corrupt local governments suddenly found themselves facing arrest by human marines whose equipment made resistance pointless. Captain Rachel Morgan reported that human patrols were being welcomed by civilian populations throughout the galaxy. Species that had lived with constant threats of war or criminal activity were experiencing peace and security for the first time in generations. Human medical ships were providing aid to refugee populations that had been ignored by galactic authorities. Human engineering teams were repairing infrastructure damaged by decades of conflict. The transformation of galactic civilization was happening faster than anyone had expected. Political systems that had been based on the balance of power between multiple species suddenly had to accommodate the reality that one species possessed overwhelming military superiority. Trade networks restructured themselves around human security guarantees. Scientific research programs refocused on trying to understand human technological achievements. Admiral Watson established the new headquarters for human galactic operations aboard the HMS Earthshaker. The command center that coordinated 6 planet ships and their supporting fleets became the de facto center of galactic military power. Diplomatic messages that had once been sent to the Galactic Council were now copied to human command as a matter of routine courtesy. Colonel Eric Turner oversaw the expansion of human presence throughout the galaxy. New bases were established, in strategic locations not for conquest, but for maintaining the peace that human military superiority had made possible. Human forces operated under strict rules of engagement that emphasized protection of civilian populations and minimal use of force except when absolutely necessary. The galaxy was learning to live with a new reality. The species that had been dismissed as primitive farmers and researchers had become the dominant military power in known space. Human ships patrolled trade routes, mediated disputes between alien governments, and provided security for scientific expeditions exploring dangerous regions of space. But even as humanity assumed its new role as the galaxy's peacekeepers, the work continued on 5 additional worlds where new planet ships were under construction. The galaxy had taught humanity an important lesson about the relationship between power and respect. Human leaders had no intention of ever returning to a position of weakness or dependence on alien protection. The age of humanity's deference to alien authority was over. The age of human leadership in galactic affairs had begun. And deep beneath the surface of distant worlds, the sound of construction continued as humanity prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating the species that had learned to build weapons while others slept.